I remember when I first started planning my wife's surprise birthday party. It was supposed to be a day where we could both step away from the usual chaos of life, a chance to celebrate her and make her feel appreciated for everything she did. I spent weeks planning, making sure every detail was perfect. I wanted to create a moment she'd always remember, one where she felt truly loved and cherished. The idea came to me one night when I was scrolling through my phone and saw a photo of her smiling during one of our past celebrations. I had always admired her ability to make others feel good about themselves, her warmth, her energy. I knew she deserved a big celebration, one that reflected everything I felt about her. So I got to work. I booked a venue, made a guest list, and started picking out a theme for the party. Everything from the decorations to the food was carefully chosen to make it a memorable night. I spent hours deciding on the perfect cake. She had a favorite flavor and I wanted everything to be just right. The thought of her walking into that room, her face lighting up with surprise, filled me with excitement. I could already imagine the look in her eyes when she saw all of the people she loved gathered to celebrate her. I was determined to make it special, and I wanted it to be a reflection of how much she meant to me. Everything seemed perfect in those weeks leading up to the party. I was so wrapped up in the planning that I barely thought about anything else. I'd tell myself that once everything was done, we could sit back, enjoy the night, and have fun like we used to. But then, everything changed. It was a typical evening when I discovered it. I was sitting on the couch going through some old photos on my phone. I loved looking back at the moments we'd shared, reminding myself of the good times, the trips we'd taken, the little moments in between. I had this habit of saving pictures of her, ones that showed her smile, the way she looked when she was genuinely happy. It was comforting in a way to relive those times. It's part of what made me so weary to relive those last 2 years. Because when I relived those times, it was always to remind myself of the good times. But as I flipped through my phone, I came across something I hadn't expected, a video. I didn't even know it was there at first. It wasn't like the usual pictures I had stored away. I had no memory of ever saving it. I hit play thinking it might be some random clip I'd taken while out with friends or on vacation. But as soon as the video started, everything froze in my chest. There she was, my wife. But not like I had ever seen her before. She was laughing, looking carefree, and clearly having a good time. But the man next to her, I didn't recognize him. He was leaning in close, laughing with her, touching her in a way that made my stomach twist. At first I thought it was some innocent moment, something that could be explained away. But then it kept going. There was no denying what I was seeing. My wife, my partner, the woman I thought I knew, was with someone else. The video didn't lie. They were too close, too comfortable with one another. She touched him, not the way you touch a friend or a colleague, but the way someone touches someone they're involved with. I don't even know how long the video lasted. Time seemed to stop as I watched it over and over in disbelief. My head was spinning and I couldn't make sense of anything. How could this be happening? How could she betray me like this? How had I not seen it? The questions flooded my mind, but there were no answers. In that moment, everything I thought I knew about our marriage crumbled. I had always believed that we were solid. We'd had our share of ups and downs, sure, but who doesn't? I had thought we were like everyone else, working through things together, keeping the spark alive and building something real. But here, in front of me, was a truth I hadn't even imagined. I felt a mix of emotions I didn't know how to process. I was angry, but I was also hurt. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have ever anticipated. It was as if the floor had disappeared beneath me. I wanted to scream, but all I could do was sit there, stunned, staring at the screen. For hours I just sat in silence, the video playing over and over. I tried to convince myself that it wasn't real, that there must have been some mistake. Maybe the video was old, maybe it was something that didn't matter. But I knew deep down that it did. There was no way to explain it away. The emotions that followed were overwhelming. I couldn't breathe, my chest felt tight, and my hands shook as I tried to make sense of it. I wanted to talk to her, confront her, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. I didn't even know where to begin. What could I say? How could I even look her in the eye after what I had just seen? At that point, I was no longer thinking about the party I had been planning. I had spent so much time making sure everything would go smoothly for her big night, but now it didn't matter. How could I celebrate someone who had done this to me? The party, the decorations, the guest list, the cake, none of it seemed important anymore. My mind was consumed with thoughts of the video and what it meant for us. Oh, I thought about the years we had spent together, about all the memories I'd cherished, and now I couldn't even look at her without feeling sick. I didn't know what to do. All I could do was sit there, replaying the video and trying to figure out how I had missed the signs. I had been so blind, so trusting. How did I not see the way she'd been pulling away? How had I failed to notice the small changes, the little things that now seemed so obvious? There were moments I could now trace back, moments that should have raised red flags, but I never saw them. I never questioned her, not like I should have. And now it was too late. In that moment, I made a decision. I couldn't keep this to myself. I couldn't just let her carry on with her life as if nothing had happened. I wasn't going to just confront her privately and let her explain herself. No, I wanted everyone to know. I wanted to expose the truth. The people closest to us, the ones who saw us as this perfect couple, deserved to know what was really going on. I wasn't going to keep this secret. I didn't know how I was going to do it yet, but I knew one thing. The night of her surprise birthday party would be the night it all came out. That was the moment that I would make everything known. It would be the most unforgettable night of her life, and it would be the last one we shared together as a couple. The more I watched the video, the more it gnawed at me. It was like the world had tilted off its axis, and I couldn't find my balance. I felt this overwhelming urge to stop the video, to look away and pretend I hadn't seen it, but every time I tried to stop it, I couldn't. I kept playing it over and over, each time hoping for a different outcome. Something that would make sense of what was happening. Something that would make sense of what was happening to me. I thought about some of the videos while lying there in bed, but the truth didn't change. It was right there in front of me. My wife, with someone else, betraying me in the most painful way. I had always trusted her. That was the hardest part. I thought we were different, that we had something strong, something real. We had been through so much together. College, moving in together, building our lives side by side. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. We had our routines, our inside jokes, our quiet moments that felt like they meant more than anything. I always believed that no matter what, we were solid. Our connection was unshakable. Or so I thought. The shock was overwhelming. It felt like a punch to the gut. I wanted to scream, to cry, to do anything to get rid of the image of her with him. But I couldn't. I just sat there, frozen, staring at my phone, watching them laugh together, touch each other in ways I never imagined her touching anyone else. It felt like my heart was being ripped apart in slow motion. I couldn't believe it. I kept thinking about all the years we had spent together, all the things we had been through. How could she do this? How could she betray me like this and keep it hidden for so long? I wanted to deny it, to tell myself that it wasn't real, that I was imagining things. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just a mistake or a misunderstanding. This was real. She was with someone else. And in that moment, everything we had built together seemed like a lie. The person I thought I knew, the woman I had shared my life with, was someone else entirely. How had I not seen it? How had I missed the signs? The more I thought about it, the more angry I became. Not just with her, but with myself. How had I been so blind? Why hadn't I noticed the small things, the subtle changes in her behavior that now seemed so obvious? It was hard to come to terms with the fact that the life I thought we had was nothing more than an illusion. I tried to tell myself that maybe it wasn't as bad as it seemed, that maybe she wasn't really cheating. But the video told a different story. The way she looked at him, the way they were so comfortable together, it was all there, in full view. There was no denying it. And the worst part, I couldn't escape it. I couldn't unsee it. The image of her with him kept replaying in my mind like a broken record over and over again. I couldn't focus on anything else. My thoughts were consumed by it. As the hours passed, I tried to distract myself. I grabbed a drink hoping it would help me calm down, but it didn't. It just made the situation feel even more surreal. I felt like I was living in some kind of nightmare, one where everything I thought I knew was turned upside down. I couldn't stop thinking about the implications of it all. What did it mean for us, for our future? How could I ever look at her the same way again? I kept thinking about how perfect everything had seemed leading up to the party. We had just celebrated our anniversary, a quiet dinner at home. There was no indication that anything was wrong. We talked about our plans for the future, about trips we wanted to take, things we wanted to accomplish together. How could she act like everything was fine while she was carrying on an affair behind my back? It felt like a slap in the face. The more I thought about it, the more betrayed I felt. I thought about all the times I had trusted her, all the times I had supported her, all the times we had worked through our problems together. How could she just throw that all away? How could she lie to me like this, with no remorse? It didn't make sense. She had been so careful, so good at hiding it. I didn't know how long it had been going on, but it didn't matter. The fact was, she had been seeing someone else and I had no idea. It hurt to think about how little I actually knew about her, how little I knew about what had really been going on in her life. The anger I felt towards her wasn't just about the betrayal. It was about the deception, the lies she had told me, and the trust she had shattered. It wasn't just about the affair. It was about the years we had spent together, the life we had built, and the way she had casually torn it all apart without a second thought. I thought about how easy it had been for her to hide it, how well she had played the part of the loving wife. How had I not seen through it? How had I been so naive? I couldn't keep the feelings inside anymore. I was furious, heartbroken, confused, and devastated all at once. I needed to talk to someone, to tell someone what had happened, but I couldn't bring myself to. I felt so alone in that moment, like there was no one who could understand the pain I was going through. I couldn't even talk to my friends or family about it. Not yet, not until I figured out what to do. I didn't even know what I wanted. Part of me wanted to confront her right away, to yell at her, to make her feel the pain I was feeling. Another part of me wanted to run, to get as far away from her as possible and never look back. But I couldn't do either. I was paralyzed by the thought of it all. I didn't know how to fix this. I didn't know how to move forward. All I knew was that the life I had built with her was over. I could never go back to the way things were before. Nothing would ever be the same. And the hardest part was knowing that no matter how hard I tried, I would never be able to unsee the video. The betrayal would always be there, hanging between us like a dark cloud, blocking out everything else. The trust was gone, and with it, the relationship we had spent years building. I had no idea where to go from here, or if there was even a way to salvage anything. But I knew one thing for sure. I could never go back to the way things were before I saw that video. The truth had been revealed, and there was no pretending anymore. It wasn't an easy decision. Part of me wanted to confront her immediately, to talk to her and demand the truth, to see her reaction when I told her what I had found. But as I thought about it more, I realized that confrontation wouldn't be enough. It wasn't just about my anger or my hurt. It was about the people around us, the friends and family who had always seen us as this perfect couple. They deserved to know. It felt like the right thing to do, to show everyone the reality of what was happening. After all, it wasn't just me who had been deceived. It was them too, and they needed to see the truth. The more I thought about it, the more I became convinced that the party was the perfect place for it. My wife's surprise birthday celebration, the night that should have been all about her, was going to be the night everything came crashing down. I had spent so much time planning this party for her, wanting to make it a night she'd never forget. But now, all that mattered was making her face what she had done. I couldn't keep quiet about it any longer. It wasn't just about the video, it was about the years of lies, the trust she had shattered, the future we had built together that was now nothing but an illusion. The people she had deceived needed to know what was really going on. I remember pacing around my apartment, staring at the screen of my phone, watching the video again. I couldn't look away. Even though every time I saw her with him, it felt like I was being stabbed all over again. But I had to do it. I had to show everyone. The thought of confronting her privately, of talking to her one-on-one, didn't sit right with me. I couldn't let her get away with this, with pretending like nothing had happened. The video, the truth, it had to be exposed, and the party was the perfect setting. It would be a public revelation, one that left no room for denial or hiding. She wouldn't be able to control the situation to spin it in her favor. The truth would be out there for everyone to see. I spent the next couple of days in a haze. I knew I had to follow through with my plan, but I wasn't sure how to execute it. I didn't want to ruin the night for everyone else, but at the same time I couldn't let this go on. I kept thinking about all the people who would be there, our friends, our families, people who had watched us grow together. They all saw us as this perfect couple, but now I saw it for what it was, an illusion, built on a foundation of lies. They needed to see that. They needed to know the truth, just as I had come to know it. I remember thinking, as I scrolled through the guest list, that it would be a cruel thing to do. Exposing her like this, especially in front of all our loved ones, it felt like a betrayal in itself. But then I thought about what she had done. How could I let her walk into that party with everything still intact, with everyone still believing that everything was fine? I couldn't live with myself if I didn't expose her for what she was. This wasn't about revenge, it was about justice, about showing the world what she had done. It wasn't fair to me, and it wasn't fair to the people who had trusted us. As the day of the party approached, my anxiety grew. I kept telling myself that it was the right thing to do, that the truth needed to come out. But every time I thought about it, a pit formed in my stomach. I didn't want to destroy everything, but I couldn't go on pretending like nothing had happened. I had to make her face what she had done. I planned every detail of the party meticulously, as I had originally intended. I wanted everything to look perfect when she walked in. I didn't want to take away from the night entirely, but I couldn't help but feel a sense of dread knowing what was coming. The cake, the decorations, the guests, they all seemed so insignificant now compared to the bombshell I was about to drop. But I couldn't back out. I knew that if I didn't do this, I would always wonder if I had made the right choice. I would always be asking myself why I didn't confront the truth sooner. I didn't tell anyone what I had planned. I couldn't bring myself to talk to anyone about it. No one would understand the conflict inside me. Part of me was scared of what would happen after I hit play on that video, scared of how my wife would react, scared of how everyone else would react. But there was another part of me, the part that had been hurt so deeply, that knew this was the only way to truly make her face the consequences of her actions. She couldn't just get away with it. The day of the party arrived and I felt like I was walking through a fog. I had everything set up, the decorations, the food, the music, but all I could think about was the video, the moment I would hit play and watch everything fall apart. I had a choice. I could back out, I could let her have her perfect night and pretend that everything was okay, but I knew I couldn't live with that. I couldn't pretend like I didn't know what she had done. I stayed in the background as the guests started to arrive, making small talk, pretending like everything was normal. My heart was racing the entire time, but I did my best to keep my composure. I watched her, standing there, smiling and greeting everyone. She had no idea what was coming. She looked so happy, so unaware, and it made everything inside me twist. How could she stand there acting like nothing was wrong? How could she look so innocent when I knew the truth? I kept telling myself that this was for the best, that everyone needed to know. But watching her interact with everyone, I couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt. Finally, the time came. The room was filled with laughter, conversation, and celebration. She was standing at the front of the room thanking everyone for being there. She had no idea that in just a few moments, everything would change. I stood up, walked to the front, and hit play on the video. The screen flickered to life and the room went quiet. I didn't even have to say anything. The video spoke for itself. It showed her laughing and touching the other man in ways that no one should ever touch someone who wasn't their partner. It showed everything, every moment, every glance, every touch. The silence in the room was deafening. My wife's face drained of color as she realized what was happening. I could see the shock and panic in her eyes as the truth unraveled before everyone. The video played through, and all I could do was stand there. I felt a mix of satisfaction and disgust. This was it. The truth was out. The night I had planned to be about celebrating her had turned into the night I exposed her for what she truly was. She didn't get a chance to explain, didn't get to make excuses. It was all there in front of everyone, and I knew in that moment that nothing would ever be the same again. I prayed, with everything I had within myself. I whispered in the back of my head. The room was silent. So quiet it felt like the air had thickened. I couldn't hear anything except the hum of my own heartbeat and the muffled sounds of my wife's labored breathing. She was frozen, staring at the screen, her eyes wide with disbelief as the video played on. I knew she hadn't expected this. No one had. The shock on her face was almost too much to bear, but it was also the most satisfying thing I had ever seen. For once, it felt like I had control. She had been the one controlling the narrative for so long, keeping her betrayal hidden from me, but now I was the one in the driver's seat. Now, everyone knew the truth. But as the seconds stretched into what felt like an eternity, I began to feel a shift. The anger I had been holding on to, the rage that had fueled me for days, started to dissipate. It was replaced by a hollow feeling in my chest. What had I done? I had thought that exposing her would bring me some kind of relief, some form of justice, but all I felt now was a deep, aching emptiness. I wasn't sure if it was guilt or just the overwhelming weight of what was happening, but it crushed me. This wasn't some victory. It was a destruction of everything I thought I knew. My wife still hadn't moved. I couldn't look at her, not now. I couldn't stand to see the shame, the fear, the panic that was radiating off of her. Instead, I focused on the faces of the people in the room, the friends, the family, the people who had come to celebrate her birthday. They were all staring at the screen, some with their mouths open in shock, others looking at me with a mixture of disbelief and confusion. The looks on their faces were almost worse than anything I had felt so far. I had just destroyed the image they had of us, the couple they had always admired. I had ripped apart the life we had all shared. And for what? There was no going back now. I had exposed her. I had shown them all the truth, but in doing so, I had changed everything. I could feel the shift in the room, the way the energy had turned cold, the air had thickened, and it felt like I was suffocating. Everyone was uncomfortable, unsure of how to react, and in that discomfort, I started to feel it too. What had I hoped to accomplish by this revenge justice? Or had I just wanted to make her feel the same way I had felt for days, trapped, suffocated, exposed? I could hear whispers now, the soft murmurs of people trying to process what they had just witnessed. I could hear her voice, barely audible, calling out my name. Her voice was different, almost pleading. It wasn't the confident tone I had heard so many times before. It wasn't the voice of the woman who had deceived me for so long. It was a broken version of her, one that sounded small and scared, but I couldn't bring myself to look at her, not after everything that had just happened. The room began to shift again. People were starting to leave, murmuring their goodbyes, their faces still painted with shock and confusion. I wasn't sure if they were leaving because they felt uncomfortable or because they simply didn't know how to deal with what had just happened. I knew how they felt. I didn't know what to feel either. I couldn't stop thinking about how everything had just unraveled. The years of trust, of shared moments, of promises made and broken, was any of it real? Or had it all been a carefully constructed facade, one that she had managed to keep up for so long? I didn't know how long I stood there, just watching the room empty out, the people filtering out one by one. The music had stopped, the laughter had faded, and all that was left was the sound of my own breath and the hollow feeling that had settled in my chest. I didn't want to be here anymore. I didn't want to see her, to face her, to deal with the aftermath of what I had just done. I had wanted this moment of clarity, this revelation, but now that it had come, I wasn't sure what to do with it. Eventually, the last of the guests left, and it was just me and her in the room. She was sitting on the couch now, her hands shaking as she wiped her eyes, the tears streaking down her face. I hadn't expected to see her cry, at least not like this. But seeing her like this, so broken, only made me feel worse. I didn't know what I had expected, but it certainly wasn't this. Part of me wanted to feel satisfaction, to feel like I had finally gotten the upper hand. But all I felt was emptiness. It wasn't enough. Nothing would ever be enough. I had exposed her, but I had also destroyed everything in the process. There was no coming back from this, not for us. She looked up at me then, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and regret. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. For a moment, neither of us said anything. It was as if we were both waiting for the other to say something, but neither of us knew where to start. How could she apologize for what she had done? How could I even begin to explain what I was feeling? Words felt useless now. "How does the last 3 days feel?" "I'm sorry," she finally whispered, her voice barely audible. But it wasn't enough. It could never be enough. How could an apology fix something like this? How could any words undo what had been done? The trust that had been broken, the betrayal that had been exposed. There were no words that could heal that. I wanted to scream, to ask her how she could have done this, how she could have lied to me, to everyone, for so long. But I couldn't. The words were stuck in my throat. I had thought that confronting her in front of everyone would make me feel better, but now I realized it had only made everything worse. There was no satisfaction in seeing her broken. There was no triumph in her regret. All I had done was destroy us, and in doing so, I had destroyed myself. I turned away from her then, not knowing what else to do. I couldn't look at her anymore. I couldn't stand to be in the same room with her, not after everything that had happened. I needed space. I needed time to think, to process what had just unfolded. I didn't know if there was a way forward from here, but I knew one thing for sure. Our relationship, whatever it had been, was over. There was no going back, and there was no fixing this. The truth had been revealed, and there was no place for me in the life we had shared. The betrayal was too deep, too raw, and I couldn't find a way to move past it. As I walked out of the room, I left behind everything we had built together. And in that moment I realized that I had no idea who she was anymore, or who I was in relation to her. The person I had trusted, the person I had loved, was gone. And all that remained was the aftermath of betrayal and the bitter taste of knowing the truth. The last time I asked her what she wanted me to say before answering her, I replied defensively, "The truth is beneath me." The days after the party blurred together, each one feeling like a repeat of the last. I couldn't escape the heaviness that had settled in my chest. Every time I tried to sleep, I was flooded with images of that night. The video playing, her face frozen in shock, the way the room had gone from celebration to chaos in a matter of seconds. The sound of people's whispers still echoed in my ears, the uncomfortable glances, the hushed voices that followed me as I walked through the streets. It was as if the entire world knew what had happened, and I couldn't escape it. I hadn't spoken to her since that night. I didn't know how to. What could I possibly say? How could I look at her after everything that had happened and pretend like things could go back to normal? I had thought that confronting her in front of everyone would give me the closure I needed, but now, in the silence that followed, all I could feel was a growing emptiness. I wasn't angry anymore, not in the way I had been. That anger had burned itself out the moment I saw the look in her eyes, but now I was left with a quiet, suffocating pain. The truth had come out, but I wasn't sure it had made things any better. Andrea, I spent my days alone, replaying everything in my mind. The betrayal, the lies, the way she had looked at me when the video finished, it all haunted me. She had been so careful, so deliberate in the way she hid her affair from me. For so long, I had believed in the life we were building together, in the future we had planned, but now all of that was shattered. It felt like I was walking through a fog, unable to see clearly, unable to make sense of any of it. At some point, I decided I had to talk to her. I couldn't keep avoiding it. But when the time came, I didn't know where to begin. I couldn't erase what I had done. I couldn't take back the video, the humiliation, the way everything had spiraled out of control. But I needed answers. I needed to understand how we had gotten here. She had called me several times after the party, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. I wasn't ready to hear her voice, to hear her try to justify what she had done. I wasn't sure if I ever would be. The guilt was eating away at me. Guilt for how I had exposed her, for the way I had dragged our personal lives into the public eye. But then, there was the other part of me. The part that felt like she deserved it. She had lied to me, betrayed me, and hidden something so big for so long. Part of me felt like I had done the right thing. But that didn't change the fact that I still loved her, that I still cared about her, even after everything. It was late one evening when I finally picked up the phone. I didn't know what to expect, but I knew I couldn't keep running away from this. When I heard her voice, it was soft, almost broken. "Please, can we talk?" she asked. I didn't say anything at first. I wasn't sure what to say. There was so much I wanted to scream at her, so many questions that had been swirling in my mind since that night. But I couldn't bring myself to do it. I wasn't sure if I wanted the truth anymore. I wasn't sure if I could handle it. "I need to see you," she continued. "I need to explain." I let out a sigh, my fingers tightening around the phone. Part of me wanted to hang up, to shut her out completely, but I couldn't do that either. She had been my wife, my partner, my best friend. I couldn't just cut her off, not without hearing what she had to say. "Fine," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "We can meet." We agreed to meet at a small cafe, somewhere neutral. I didn't want to be in our apartment, surrounded by memories of everything we had shared. I needed space. I needed distance. When I saw her sitting at a table by the window, I almost didn't recognize her. She looked different, smaller, fragile. Her hair was messy and there were dark circles under her eyes. She looked like someone who had been broken, someone who was trying to put the pieces of their life back together. But it wasn't the woman I had known. The woman I had known would have sat there, confident and collected, as if nothing could touch her. This woman, this broken version of her, was someone I didn't know. I sat down across from her, my hands clasped tightly together on the table. Neither of us spoke for a moment. The silence between us was thick, uncomfortable, but neither of us seemed to know how to break it. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely audible. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything." Her eyes filled with tears again, and I couldn't look away. I couldn't make myself speak. I wanted to ask her why she had done this to me, to us. I wanted to know what had driven her to betray me like this, to destroy everything we had built. But the words stuck in my throat. I had no idea how to have this conversation. I didn't know where to start. "I never meant to hurt you," she continued, her voice trembling. "I've been lying to myself, to you, for so long, and I thought I could fix it. I thought I could make everything go back to normal, but I couldn't. And now I've ruined everything." Her words felt like a knife twisting in my gut. She was sorry, but that didn't change anything. I had seen the video. I had watched her with him, and that image kept playing over and over in my mind. The trust that had been broken couldn't be repaired with a simple apology. "I don't know what to say," I finally managed, my voice hoarse. "I don't know how to fix this. I don't expect you to forgive me," she said quickly, her hands shaking. "I don't expect you to forget what I've done, but I need you to know that I was lost. I was scared, and I made the worst decision of my life. I thought I could keep it hidden, but I can't. I can't keep lying to you anymore." Her words stung, but they also felt empty. She was sorry, but it was too late for apologies. What did it matter now? The damage had been done, and I wasn't sure if I could ever trust her again. It felt like we were strangers now, people who had once been close but had drifted so far apart that we couldn't find our way back. Once I reached the entrance hall, there was a loud roar of applause. I turned my head toward the sound, and there was no one there. "So I don't know what's left for us," I said quietly, feeling the weight of the words as they left my mouth. "I don't know if there's anything left to salvage." She nodded, her eyes filled with tears. "I understand," she whispered. We sat in silence for a long time after that, neither of us knowing what to say next. I had wanted answers, but now that I had them, I wasn't sure they mattered. The truth was, I couldn't change what had happened, and neither could she. Our relationship had been built on a lie, and no amount of words could erase that. Eventually I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. She looked up at me, her eyes searching mine, but I couldn't bring myself to look at her any longer. I turned and walked away, leaving her sitting there, alone. I don't know what the future holds, but I know one thing for sure: I can never go back to the way things were. The trust is gone, and with it so is everything we once had. There's no fixing this. And as I walked away from her, I realized that, for the first time in a long time, I was finally free.